Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or good night, depending on when you are watching this video. My name is Danny Morris with C&M Cattle, and I'm here today to answer one of the most common questions that we receive on our farm. How much beef do you get from a cow? In our case, it's how much beef do you get from a steer? We finish our animals out to 1,400 pounds plus, but some producers will sell their animals at a smaller weight. Assuming a 1,400 pound animal, you can expect to receive more beef than you would from a smaller animal. It's common sense, right? So on a whole, half, or quarter, how much can I expect to receive? In general, it's about 40% of the animal's live weight, which is how we sell our animals here on the farm. We're also going to talk about how we actually raise the cattle that we have here on the farm. What are we looking at when we are raising these animals to be sold to our customers? We are always striving for quality here at C&M Cattle. And when I tell you we raise the best beef around, it's no joke. We truly do raise the best beef around. We make sure to source the best cattle that we can, and while our cattle are here on the farm, they are treated with utmost care. No corners are cut, no expense is spared in the raising of our beef. Because if I can turn out a high quality product, our customers will come back year after year. How do you turn out a high quality product? Well, first and foremost, it requires high quality cattle. A good ration that is going to allow the animals to get the energy that they need to maintain their body while to continue to grow out and finish out properly. We want to make sure that our carcass have enough marbling where there is intermuscular fat to produce that juicy steak that we all desire. Also, our cattle are not dry lighted. As you can see behind me, we have fresh green pastures and some nosy neighbors, if you can see them behind me. Our cattle are treated not only fed properly, but they're also taken care of from a veterinarian and a medical standpoint with the utmost care. We want to ensure that our animals are happy and healthy while they're here on our farm. A happy and healthy animal turns into high quality beef that will produce a very satisfied customer. And a very satisfied customer is a repeat customer, which is what we strive for here at C&M Cattle. As you can see behind me, we have Angus cattle. Some are black, some are red, and some are a Charolais cross. Primarily we raise black Angus here on the farm, but I can tell you that an Angus cross will taste just as well as a black-eyed animal. Our cattle will be 1,400 pounds when they go to slaughter. So what does that mean for you as the customer? It means that you can expect to receive about 40% of that weight, of the live weight, in beef to take home. Now, the amount of each individual cut that you receive is largely dependent upon how you choose to have the meat cut up. If you want an inch and a quarter inch steak, you're going to receive less steaks, but the total poundage will be the same, just the quantity of steaks will be less. If you elect to not have roast and stew meat, it's simply going to be ground in a burger, and you will have more ground beef to feed your family. Truly, you can choose how you want the meat to be cut up. It truly is your beef customized to fit you and your family. The only thing that varies is how much of each individual cut you actually want based on how you fill out the cut sheet. We have taken a whole beef to slaughter to feed our family, and I have gathered that information and weighed each individual cut to show you as an example how much beef you can expect to get from steaks, roast, stew meat, a brisket, and ground beef. There are a few other cuts should you select them. We'll also go over processing costs and how much the total animal costs and its dollar per pound cost to you after you paid everything. I want to ensure that our customer understands what exactly they're getting when they buy a whole, a half, or a quarter beef from us here at C&M Cattle.
There are three primary ways that beef is priced when sold directly off the farm. Cattle are typically sold based on the live weight of the animal at slaughter, the rail weight, or as a package of different cuts. Here in this picture you see a few carcasses. If the farmer was selling via live weight or rail weight, they would need to know the weight of the animal when they're determining the price that they will charge you. Now, if we're talking about selling via live weight, You will be paying for the entire weight of the animal before it was killed at the processor. If you're talking about buying it by the rail weight, you would be buying it based on the weight of the carcass as you see hanging here on screen. So we sell our animals by the live weight. This is some of our animals that are soon to be processed directly off the farm. You will notice that they are completely finished out. They are roughly 1,400 pounds or more, and they are ready to go to slaughter. These animals will be processed at a custom kill facility, also known as a custom slaughterhouse. Custom slaughter operations offer services for people who want an animal slaughtered or processed for their own personal use. The meat is cut, packaged, and labeled not for sale. This meat is returned to the owner of the animal, who may have bought it directly from a farmer, but they cannot resell the meat. People who buy freezer beef from farmers are buying a live animal with the kill date having already been booked by the farmer and the farmer making delivery to the custom kill facility. If a producer wishes to sell meat by the cut, processing and packaging must be conducted at a USDA inspected facility. Really, the only difference between the two is that under USDA inspection, you're able to resell the meat as individual cuts to the public. Our customers are buying a whole half or quarter to feed their family and do not plan to resell the individual cuts. By selling by the railway, the customer is going to experience a 30 to 40% increase in the processing cost, as USDA inspected slaughter does cost more. Let's go over a cut sheet example. When you're buying beef directly from a farmer, you will be asked to fill out a cut sheet. This cut sheet tells the processor how exactly you want your meat cut up. I'm just going to go over a common example of cuts that our customers will choose. We'll start off with the steaks. That's what people seem to like the most about buying a freezer beef. It's very common for a customer to desire a ribeye and a sirloin steak. The T-bone and the New York strip and fillet come from the same cut of meat, so you can choose the T-bone if you want a bone-in steak. If you want a boneless steak, simply select the New York strip and fillet. If you want the flank and skirt, you can select those. If you don't want those, you simply can ask that they be ground into ground beef. Essentially, if you don't select a cut, you can assume that it will be ground into burger. The quantity per pack is as it says. How many steaks do you want per pack? If you are a small family, you may only want 2 per pack. If you have a larger family, you may want 4 or more. On the roasts, there are many different types of roasts, and there are a lot of different cuts that come out of these parts of the animal. For example, if you want the chuck and shoulder roast, you can select those. You can select, do you want a 2 to 3, 3 to 4, or maybe even a 4 to 5 pound roast if you're feeding a bigger family. You can also select the ribs. The ribs are a fattier piece of meat. I personally do not like them, so I usually will have the ribs ground into hamburger. And then, of course, on the burger, you can select its leanness. Do you want it to be 70-30? Do you want it to be an 80-20 or a 90-10? 80-20 is going to be average. 90-10 will be lean. 90% beef to 10% fat content, for those of you that don't know what that means. The stew meat is simply going to come from the roast cuts, but you have it cut up into smaller chunks of meat for making beef stew, or if you want to make kebabs, you can do that as well. Some of the specialty cuts that you can select, they usually will have a small fee associated with them. Selecting the tongue or the oxtail, or even the liver, should you want those, though it's not listed on this example cut sheet. Now on the right hand side, this is going to be used by the slaughterhouse. They're going to write down the animal's tag number from the farmer, its live weight if it was given, its hanging weight. So if you're buying your beef by the rail weight, this will be the weight that it's based off of. Usually when you're purchasing by the rail weight, you're going to pay a higher price than you would per live weight. Then they have, of course, the different fees associated with processing the animal. The kill fee, if there's a hanging weight, that may charge a certain price per pound. And then there may be an extra cost for each individual pack of ground beef. There may even be a cost should you desire to keep some fat or bones. They may charge you for that. The tongue and the oxtail, usually it's a flat fee to have that cut from the animal, and that will be packaged and added to your order as well. So, how much beef can you expect to get from a carcass? Here in the next few slides, you're going to see material from a few different universities. I'm a big proponent of information from universities. That way, you're not just taking my word for it. We're looking at information that has been researched and collected and prepared for the public by your local university. This particular publication comes from the University of Tennessee Extension Service, and the question is asked, how much meat will I get? In this example, we have a 1,200-pound animal that, after being processed, produced a 750-pound carcass and yielded 490 pounds of boneless and trimmed beef, essentially 40%. The breakup on average in this study was 185 pounds of ground beef, 90 pounds of roast and steak, 85 pounds of round roast and steak, 80 pounds of rib and loin steaks, and then 50 pounds of other cuts. And again, this is just on average. It is all dependent on how you fill out the cut sheet. If you said you wanted everything ground into burger, which you can do, you would obviously have more ground beef. If you decided to maximize the amount of roast, maximize the amount of steaks, you would have less ground beef. One of the things I do want you to understand is when you're buying by the live weight, you're buying everything. So you may see this 490 pounds of beef and think, well, I'm not really getting everything I paid for. Well, there's a lot that comes off of the animal before you receive the beef. We're talking about the hide, all of the organs that we don't eat, of course, all of the excess fat, the bones. A lot is removed from the animal's carcass before it is deboned and trimmed, or after it's deboned and trimmed. This is what is left, the 490 pounds of boneless and trimmed beef that will be packaged, frozen, and ready for you to pick up after about 2 weeks from the kill date. Now, another question we receive a lot is, how much freezer space do I need? And again, I'm going to give you information from Oklahoma State University's Extension Service. The general rule of thumb is for every 35 to 40 pounds of beef that you receive that is packaged, you need 1 cubic foot of freezer space. So on a whole beef, you can expect to receive about 550 pounds of beef. If you're buying an animal from us, it will finish out to about 1,400 pounds, so you can expect about 550 pounds of beef. So, that being said, you're going to need a big freezer. If you had 10 cubic feet of freezer space, you would be able to hold roughly 400 pounds of beef. That's not a large enough freezer. You would need about 15 cubic feet of freezer space. I would encourage you to probably purchase a larger freezer than that. That way you can accommodate the other frozen products that you buy for your family. This chart comes from the Angus Association that just shows all the different cuts that come from a whole beef. I usually like to show this to our customers, that way they can get an idea of all the different cuts that they will receive. You may notice that some of these cuts are not listed on the cut sheet that you are filling out. Each individual processor has their own unique cut sheet that may not have all of these different cuts listed. But this is just a general overview that can serve as a guide for our customers so they know exactly what they're getting when they're buying a whole beef or what they could potentially get. Obviously, if you don't select some of these cuts, it will be ground into burger, but this does give you an overview of what you could ask from the processor when you fill out the cut sheet. Now we're going to look at some of the cuts of beef that came from the whole beef that we had processed this year. This is an example of one of our ribeye steaks. We've got great intermuscular marbling there. Here we have an example of a T-bone. Of course, it's bone in. I prefer the bone in to have that full flavor from our steak. Here we have a round roast. Again, in my opinion, a beautiful round roast with intermuscular fat in order to have a very juicy roast. If you're very conscientious about your fat intake, you can simply trim this off. I personally would not trim the excess fat off until the roast is cooked. That way you can make sure that the roast is extremely juicy and very tasteful before you.
What does a whole beef look like? Everything that you see in the bottom layer of this freezer is from a whole beef, including what select cuts I've got over here in this tote as well. These are the cuts that will go up to the house in the freezer. That way we can have this readily available for our family to cook meals. One thing I do want to note, the little bit of meat that you see in those freezer trays is from the last calf, or the last steer that we had processed. All of this over here is freshly packed ground beef in 1 pound packs, double ground, vacuum sealed. And then over here we have a wide array of cuts, anything from an oxtail to all of our roast, stew meat. We've got steaks, sirloin, filet mignon, very small, very few packs of that. We also have a few cuts of a T-bone steak along with the ribeye. The roast of various cuts, the round. We also have a few of the shoulder and chuck roast. I mean, the T-bones here, you can see here's a 2-pack T-bones of 2.45 pounds. We're going to go over all of these cuts and how much meat we actually got of each individual cut. But a large portion of this is hamburger meat. Under all of these cuts of meat that has raised up towards the top of the freezer is indeed ground beef. So we'll go through all the cuts. I've got pictures of all the cuts and how much quantity we have of each. Of course, we have one of the larger freezers. We'll actually go over, freezer space and how much space it actually takes in order to have enough room. And I'll catch you all in the next segment of the video.
Here's the breakdown for the animal that we had processed this year. This steer weighed 1,480 pounds at slaughter, had a rail weight of 936 pounds, which resulted in a 63.2% dress out, which is extremely good. Normally we will see a dress out between 59 and 62%, so 63.2 is an extremely high dress out, which is what we like to see. The actual beef that we received from this animal was 568 pounds. So as a percentage of the live weight was 38.4%. Now, if you will remember back to the publication that we looked at from UT Extension, where they showed the average was 40%, we could be over that 40% or we could be under that 40%. Remember, that's the average. So I wanted to show you a real example where we are under the average here. We're receiving 38.4%, but we are still receiving a lot of beef. So this 568 pounds, what all did we receive? Well, we received roughly 361 pounds of ground beef. Now, when we filled out our cut sheet, we chose more ground beef than roast and steak because we do eat a lot of burger. The chuck roast we ended up receiving about 20 pounds of chuck roast, 17 pounds of rump roast, and about 10 pounds of shoulder roast. Now, there were some roast cuts that we did not choose, and we simply had them ground up into burger. Some of the roasts were cut up into stew meat, and then, of course, what everyone likes to know is how much steak did we receive, or can you expect to receive? Here we have 25 to 26 pounds of ribeye, about 47 pounds of T-bone, and 32 pounds of sirloin. Now, the reason why we have more T-bones as far as pounds go is this is bone-in. If we were to select New York strip and filet, you would have less pounds of steak because the bones would have been removed. We had a few packs of filet mignon, which was roughly 3.5 pounds. The brisket was very large at 27.61 pounds, and we actually had to have that brisket cut into fourths in order for it to be small enough size for us to cook for our family. And then we had the oxtail and then some tenderized steaks. Some people call these cube steaks. I personally call them minute steaks. These are the steaks that you will batter and fry. All in all, we received about 64% of the order was ground beef. We had roughly 10% of the beef received was in roast, because again the stew meat comes from the roast. We had roughly 20% in steak. Grab the filet mignon there. We had roughly 20% of the animal was in steak, 5% in brisket, though we could have had that cut in, we could have had that ground, and then of course we got our tenderized steak as well. So this is largely dependent on the amount that you receive on these cuts. Is largely dependent on how you choose to have the animal processed. What you're probably concerned with is cost. So let's look at that. The animal itself, we charge $2 a pound at 1,480 pounds. The steer cost $2,960. Processing was $844.64. So we were out of pocket $3,805 approximately. So the total cost per pound is $6.70. This is going to be a little higher than your price per pound of ground beef in the store, but if you start to average in all of your steaks and your roasts and your filet mignon and your higher end cuts, it's pretty affordable on a price per pound basis in comparison to going to the grocery store. You go to the grocery store and go to the meat counter and look at the cost of steaks, it's extremely high. A lot of families are not able to afford those steak cuts at this time. But by buying a whole beef or a half or a quarter and getting that price per pound down, a family can afford the $6.70 in comparison to an $18.99 for maybe some ribeyes or New York strips out of the grocery store. I hope that this video has helped answer any questions that you may have about purchasing a freezer beef. Now that you know how much meat you can expect from a freezer beef, it will help you in deciding whether you want to purchase a whole, half, or a quarter. When you're buying beef locally from a farmer, you know where the meat came from and you know how the animal was treated while it was on the farm. The meat is going to be of higher quality than what you can purchase in the grocery store, and it will taste so much better. If you are in the West Tennessee area and you would like to buy a whole, half, or a quarter beef, please look us up on Facebook at C&M Cattle. You can also find a link to our Facebook page in the video description below. If you would like pricing information for purchasing a whole, half, or a quarter, you can simply message us on our Facebook page or reach us directly at our phone number that is listed on our business page. Again, thank you for watching the video. Again, this has been Danny Morris with C&M Cattle, where we truly do raise the best beef around.